everything has become very expensive, that even schooling is becoming unaffordable for many. According to the TPN Credit Bureau, more than 40% of school fee accounts were in arrears at the end of last year, and 25% of parents did not make any payments at all. This is the reason for development of the School Days Rewards and Incentives program, where parents are helped to pay school fees when they shop with partner merchants, and they still earn a normal retailer loyalty points. School Day CEO Paul Esterhuizen joins me in studio to tell us more about the initiative. But before we do that, Paul, and a very good afternoon to you, and thank you for joining us in studio. I want us to weigh in on one of the big stories around basic education at the moment, and that is young learners unable to read for comprehension. What are your views on this, and what is the basic education system getting wrong here?
Take a deep breath, Rafiwa. Yes, it's great to be in studio with you. We've spoken before, and it's just good to be here. Our school days world is driven around everything that focuses in on a day at school and the school days of children's lives. And critically, we look at all of this and we know the first 5 years are the formative years in a child's life. And then we have this early childhood development strategy that's got to come to the fore. And beyond that, there's grade R, and then the first 3 years of school, grades 1, 2, and 3. And that's when we learn to read. That's when we learn some of the numeracy issues that are there. And this week, the media have had a field day. We've had a situation this week where it's been announced that 19% of the grade 4s in this country can read for meaning. And then we've got to shake our heads and wonder, how is that even possible? They've done grades 1, 2, and 3. They're in grade 4. They're the 10, 11-year-olds, and they cannot read for meaning. So something's disconnected. Something's gone horribly wrong. And the statistics that we have, we've had our president, Cyril Ramaphosa, come and say 2030, our goal is that every single 10-year-old in this country will be reading for meaning come that year. In the grade 4s, this year, we've got 1.1 million learners. That means 900,000 of them cannot read for meaning. The 2030 reading panel, which is made up of 14 of people who are highly respected in this country and have a deep concern for the state of education and the future of education in this country. And they've been assigned to monitor and track and get involved in seeing what's really happening for the delivery of that 2030 read for understanding and read for meaning goal. And it was actually in today's Sunday Times. It was a wonderful article in response to the announcement, because this announcement and the statistics that we have on this 19% can read come from a global research study. It's the Progress on Reading Literacy study. And it's global, it's international. 57 countries participate. We've been participating. The last one was 2016. These stats are 2021. And their stats are an indictment on what we're doing.
No, please continue. Are we done with your thought? Because I wanted to ask you there, the consequences of us not reaching that 2030 target that you've just described to us, what that means for future people entering the workspace or tertiary education in the country unable to read for meaning.
Well, summing it up, the 2030 reading panel say we have a generational crisis. Because how do you catch up if you cannot read? How do you continue to learn and study if you cannot read? And going back to 2008, they cite the fact that back then, the then Education Minister, Naledi Pandor, she actually implemented and gazetted the Foundation for Learning. It was driven around the fact that in the first 3 years, the grades 1, 2, and 3, the very foundation of that learning would be driven around every day in school and accountability to have scheduled reading time. Learn to read and reading time. Into that would be incorporated numeracy, and it required the delivery of the material across the entire school environment. So we always often tend to think that we live in the urban areas, we live in urban situations where we see things being delivered.
Yeah.
And we go a little bit wider and further and deeper, and we realize that there's a non-delivery. We've had wonderful learnings coming out of the research that the Department of Basic Education have at the tips of their fingers now. They've got a wonderful platform for that. And coming out of Limpopo, and so too in the Eastern Cape, we've had wonderful results of how you can actually address and improve the reading situation. COVID, obviously, we lost so many learning days, and we still don't know whether we're playing catch-up or will we ever play that catch-up. So that generational catastrophe that is cited, we need to do something. And one of the 2030 reading panel encourages is the fact that now, more than ever before, the urgency of having collaboration with government, with the Department of Basic Education, and the private sector means that we need to collaborate to deliver the material, to pick up on that 2008 Foundation for Learning strategy and get it in there. Let's get teacher assistants. Let's get our kids. Let's catch up. It's a national crisis. It's a crisis beyond understanding. And that's why the media have been saying, read the headlines this week. It's been, our kids can't read. Children cannot read for meaning. Children, what's going on? It's a panic.
No, it is an absolute panic. But what's also another panic, and this is what you're also going to engage us on today, is the pressure on parents and guardians to ensure that they're paying their school fees for their children. The School Days Initiative hoping to change the tide somewhat. But before we speak about that incentive or that initiative, how bad is the situation where parents and guardians are not able to afford to put their children through school, paying fees or skipping months or whatever it may be?
So you mentioned earlier the fact that as we closed out on last year, up to 40% of all school fee accounts, where schools levy fees on the parents and guardians and families, up to 40% of those accounts were all in arrears, which means you had your child at school, the time at school is what you're paying the school fees for, and you couldn't meet the commitments. And at the end of this first term, we still have 25% of those arrear debts still not being serviced. The trouble we've had, I've heard rumors that we're heading for another 0.5 basis points increase in interest rates, which just means...
Please don't mention that, yes. Yes, indeed.
Which means we're staring down the barrel of everything becoming more expensive again. And inflation is rife, parents are battling, the workplace has got tougher, business is struggling with what we're doing, and the cost of operating have just risen and driven through the roofs. Landlords are unsympathetic because they're trying to meet their commitments. So we're at school, we've got a kid at school, we need to pay school fees so that we can keep the teachers teaching. One of the mantras we have in School Days is to keep our teachers teaching. And that entails the fact that we have to, as communities, we have to get alongside each other to find the means and the wherewithal to plan to pay for the school days of our children's lives. We all aspire to want to have our children well taught in better schools. It's a frightening circumstance when we're thinking that 900,000 children still cannot read by the age of 10.
Yeah.
And we can bounce that around. I saw Tim Cohen in the Daily Maverick writing about his family life and upbringing, the journalist. And Tim was saying that he recalls in his home, they devoured books, the whole family. And they'd sit around the dinner table reading books, not talking to each other, eating and reading. And as parents and as community, we've got to get involved. We've got to do that. We've got to realize what our commitment is.
The problem is that the resources are not always available, particularly in lower income households, to have the opportunity that you can sit down and read a book after school. And that is one of the issues, is that those resources don't exist. And I wonder if young people today even know about public libraries, Paul, and the resources that exist therein.
Yeah. So to that point as well, because there's always this, we'll default and we'll do it all digitally. And we'll teach them to read and teach them to study, and we'll do everything digitally. It's fraught with, there's no one-way ticket there. That last mile of delivery into the schools in the Eastern Cape, I was chatting to someone this week about the fibre lines going to all the schools in the Eastern Cape, and the last mile of delivery, there's no funding, there's no budget available to make it real. So we're battling, and as parents, and that's what we're doing in our School Days world. We're wanting to create this platform where people can get involved, where parents can get involved, and that appeal to the public sector to get the resources, make them available. Let's turn the budget. There can be no better place to spend our budget, our government's budget, than in the education of our children. And our plan to pay world means we want to evoke in parents the ability to have the discipline to set aside the wherewithal to plan to pay for those future fees. A school who's missed its budget, where 40% of the accounts are in arrears, has got to look at its own resource pool and say, we can't afford to have teacher assistants. We can't afford to do the maintenance. We cannot afford to employ an extra resource. And that's where this appeal, and I love the way that the reading panel didn't come and slate the Department of Basic Education, but the 2030 reading panel appealed to everyone to get behind this and get involved. And that's public sector, government, political leaders need to stand up and lead. We don't need speech writers handing speeches to our ministers who get them for the first time and read them believing it's policy. We need policy to be spoken of from the hearts of our leaders, and then they need to make it happen. That's got to be the urge. And what do? You're sitting in, viewers are at home in their lounges on a Sunday afternoon between sport, waiting to watch the football or finishing up on the last live tournament that they're watching and hopefully hearing us. And what do you then do in your home to be able to be participative and help to make a difference? Well, one, I'd say go to the 2030 reading panel, find it, and subscribe to their newsletters to get some proper info on what the state of reading is and the state of that plan is. And then join our school days program. It's on a website, costs nothing, and we want to build this. We want to build for education for our children.
No, absolutely. And before I let you go, maybe just explain the initiative that offers the assistance to parents and the partnerships that you were able to create to make this a reality for them.
So wonderfully, we have had some business support already. Standard Bank and their UCount rewards program have enabled their rewards points to be converted and to be used to pay for education fees, right through from school through to college and varsity. And we've had tremendous support from Dis-Chem, who have an understanding that, yes, education matters. And they've been with us in the school days program from day one in enabling our members to be able to earn from their shopping and participate in initiatives. We're doing some work with the TFG group. We've got a number of initiatives which we're talking to and hoping to bring to market. We do some work with NetFlorist. We've got a number of plans in the offering around what we're doing. And we want to use reward and loyalty methodology. And then we also want to create the ability. So realize we created a currency, which is the time that your child will spend at school is education time. And we've got our currency is called education time points. So you buy an education time point and you can only ever use it to pay for school fees. It's working wonderfully well. And when people realize that it's a way of enforcing the discipline to pay for the school days of your children's lives, then that's our goal. That we can rally, we can support families who are struggling, we can support and we want to put in place the programs that will enable bursaries for young, bright students to show them that there's a career in teaching. There really is, but we need to have this holistically and practically delivered.
Paul, thank you very much for joining us in studio this afternoon. That is Paul Esterhuizen, who's the CEO of the School Days Rewards and Incentives Program, and really just weighing in on the big story this week around the lack of reading for meaning that our country's children are facing at the moment, and some of the ways in which that tide can be turned.